I'd done so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just lost everything. I won't be able to work again. I won't be able to, do my craft, do my sharing. But what I realize now is I have so much more to offer.
Mhm.
So by sharing my story, that I can help so many more people than I ever could.
Mhm.
I was a good researcher. I am a good researcher, but a lot of people are good research. A lot of people can do what I was doing. But not that many people went through what I did and are willing to talk about it. So I feel like that's like one unique thing that I can offer the world,
Wow.
and I need to offer it.
Mhm. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. I'm delighted to have with us today Dr. Caroline Fox. She is an internal medicine physician, and she is a mental health advocate after her own mental health crisis. And now she really supports organizations to improve access to care, reduce mental health stigma, and then also improve our personalized approach to mental health treatment. So, Caroline, I am so grateful to have you here with us today, and welcome to the channel.
Well, thank you, Jillian. I'm thrilled to be here. And before we get going, I just want to thank you for all your advocacy and all the work that you're doing.
Likewise, seeing your voice on social media, I just couldn't wait to have you here. I know your mission and what you say today is going to be so helpful for so many people. And to introduce you to those people, can you share a little bit more about yourself and what got you so passionate about your mission?
Sure, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm a physician and a scientist. I've been in the field for over 30 years, doing research, honestly, on risk factors for heart disease. I've become a pharmaceutical executive in the last 10 years and never really thought much about mental health or mental illness until I woke up one morning with an acute mental health crisis that seemingly came out of nowhere. I developed intense anxiety, almost like a chronic panic attack, delusions, psychosis. I ended up getting hospitalized at McLean Hospital here in Boston for 2 weeks. I was discharged without a diagnosis or without any control of my symptoms. Just bumped around, couldn't find appropriate care, couldn't find timely care, couldn't find anybody that could really take care of me. Languished for 6 months. I lost my job. I really lost all hope until my family realized they just couldn't keep me at home safely. And so at that point, they brought me to a psychiatric residential in Texas, where I spent 7 weeks. And it was the first time I would say that my experience was normalized for me. Um, and all through the treatment, I made a vow that if I ever recovered, I would become an advocate for mental health care because I couldn't believe how broken the system was. Um, Took 18 months, but I was lucky to make a full recovery. I started speaking out about my illness about a year ago. And what drives me is I know how many people are out there facing the same challenges that I face, not being able to get a timely psychiatric appointment,
Mhm.
and I want people to hear my story to understand that they're not alone and to know that there are places to turn.
hmm And what really stands out too is you're a person that knows the system inside and out. And if you're having difficulties finding treatment, what did it kind of bring up for you when you know the system so well and there were struggles finding treatment for yourself?
Well, absolutely. I was shocked. 24 hours into my first panic attack, I called my primary care doctor and was told by the nurse I had to come in. I just wanted them to give me a couple of Ativan, and they wouldn't.
Mhm.
And so, I was shaking. I couldn't drive. Nobody could take me. I somehow made my way to the hospital. And then after a couple days of this, my primary care doctor realized she couldn't deal with me. And so, I asked if I could see a psychiatrist, and she laughed and she said, Caroline, they have no appointments. They're
Mhm.
booking out 8 months. You can come and you can just sit all day in the clinic tomorrow. We have somebody that comes
Mhm.
and they'll see as many patients as they can. Are you crazy?
Mhm.
I can't come sit all day at the hospital in my condition. And it just devolved from there,
Mhm.
just trying to find somebody that could see me. And here I am in the system. I trained in the system, I worked in the system, I believed in the system, and the system let me down. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's going to let somebody down like me, I mean, what does it mean for everybody else?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you had said something earlier about coming to Houston, and it was the first time that your experience was normalized. Can you share a little bit more about what it meant for your everything that you were going through to be normalized for you?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's such a good question. When I first got sick, nothing like this had ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't know anyone who had experienced something similar. I didn't have the resources. When I was, admitted acutely at
Mm-hmm.
McLean and in the various transitional programs I did afterward, I didn't see myself in anybody else that was there. But then when I went to the psychiatric residential, I was lucky enough to go to a program that had what was called the professionals program.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was people like me. Actually, half of the patients with me were doctors, if that says anything to you about what our, our work does to the psyche. And I met people who were living with disease and who were successfully working on multiple medications, including benzodiazepams, which I was taking at very high doses. I didn't think that I would ever be able to work like that. And I learned that's actually not true. Many people lead very productive and successful careers. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized that there was a path forward, that many people had struggled with illness for a long time, and yet, they had led productive and professional lives. I mean, they were there for a reason. They had hit a bump and a low, but they'd gotten through it before and they were going to get through it again. And that was incredibly reassuring to me.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like there's so much hope when it comes to having that normalized and seeing things in a different lens, which makes me believe before you saw that there was a whole lot of different perceptions going on for the way that you viewed yourself. Would that be accurate?
That's incredibly accurate and very astute. Actually, I never believed in hope. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a I'm a physician scientist. Show me the data,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm a clinical trialist. I mean, show me the clinical trial, show me the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that all failed me in psychiatry, where a lot of that just it doesn't support care because it's just not as advanced as a lot of other fields and specialties. It's not protocolized. It's not one
Mm-hmm.
size fits all. Um, and when I was at the psychiatric residential, there was even a unit called Hope, and I couldn't believe that. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Hope. I mean, you know, we all say hope is not a strategy. And
Mm-hmm.
then when someone finally gave me hope, one of my therapists said, Caroline, I know what you have. You will get better. People just aren't doomed. He
Mm-hmm.
was the first person, it was almost after 8 months of being sick, that gave me hope.
Mm-hmm.
And it absolutely changed the course of my trajectory. And so now I realize well, with any illness, but particularly psychiatric disease, when so much is being driven
Mm-hmm.
by what's going on in your brain, hope is critical.
Uh-huh. Wow. So if if where someone's listening to this that was you back before you had this all normalized, you gave a little bit of a message, but is there any other advice that you'd give to them right now?
I mean, I think the most important advice, what I wanted to hear was that I
Mm-hmm.
would get better.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gave me that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just in such a deep hole. All I saw was no way out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very dark and it was very difficult. And if someone had just said in a way that was believable that I would get better,
Mm-hmm.
which was what my therapist ultimately said 8 months into it,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that would have been helpful is someone showing me how to access resources, which I
Mm-hmm.
did not know how to do at the time. So those are, I think, the two big things.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So you had this clinician that instilled an improved sense of hope in you, and it became kind of a pivotal point for you. And what else? What were the next steps that were starting to get you towards more wellness?
Yeah, no, great question. So at the same time, I was in a transitional program that McLean Hospital
Mhm.
offers. It's actually quite a good program. It's an outpatient program. You spend about 6 hours a day in it. It runs in 2-week blocks. And part of that, there's an occupational therapist. So I met with the occupational therapist, and he literally gave me a roadmap to get back into the working world. I had agoraphobia, which was really very limiting. So his first piece of advice was, well, you need to be able to get to where you need to go. You need to go practice driving. So I practiced driving.
Mhm.
As simple as it sounds, it was terrifying getting behind the wheel, particularly being on the highway, but that's what I needed to do. The second piece of advice was to do volunteer work. Um, and volunteer work is useful for many, many reasons, but in this context, there's a lower bar for showing up. You're a volunteer.
Mhm.
If you don't show up, it's okay, right? I mean, this isn't your professional job, your professional identity. But he said one thing, make sure if you're going to volunteer, it has to be outside the home. So I volunteered at a local food pantry, literally sorting cans. I got really good at finding the expiration date on the jars of tomato sauce. It's hard, and
Uh-huh.
people sought out my skills. And for the first time in 8 or 9 months, I actually felt like I had something to contribute to the world. So I
Mhm.
felt really good about it. I also volunteered at a local aging center, literally just swiping badges in for seniors coming in. I will say for both of them, the work, it was hard. It was hard to get there. It was hard to get dressed. It was hard to stay at the shift. Sometimes I did have panic attacks and anxiety attacks where, it was really hard for me to make it. But I have to say, I never missed a shift and I never left a shift. And that was very, very important to me.
Mhm.
And then the third step was to go on interviews for jobs that I didn't really care about, kind of as practice.
Mhm.
And so, miraculously, I went and I updated my LinkedIn status that I was no longer working. Um, and a recruiter that I had been talking to before I got sick reached out to me literally the next day asking if I was still available for a job. So of course I don't want to say I panicked, but I talked to my therapist. At this point, I was in crisis management. I was literally having therapy appointments 3 times a week, which is the definition of crisis management. And, he said, Caroline, you can do it. And, so I wrote back to the recruiter and I said, sure, I can talk. And then, every step of the way, you need to you need to meet with our scientific founders. And I go to my therapist, Caroline, you can do it. Okay, you need to give a presentation. A presentation. I haven't talked about my work in a year.
Mhm.
Caroline, you can do it. And every single step of the way. And I was offered the job and I accepted the job. And when I started the job, I was taking 19 pills a day. And it was very, very challenging. But my therapist knew that working was going to be part of my recovery.
Mhm.
And he really pushed me. And the occupational therapist knew that as well. So it was really giving me the hope, giving me that roadmap, and then having a therapist who was aware of that roadmap that was able to push me through. That's what
Mhm.
made the difference.
It's incredible to think about too, because what I'm hearing is that you being plugged into these very hopeful people that could equip you with the skills and also support you and believing in yourself was so important. And it takes me back to thinking about the stigma and how stigma impacts people even speaking up and saying, hey, I might need some help. What do you think if you were bound by stigma and thought, I don't even want to share with anyone what I'm going through right now? And what would have happened if you never got that help from the therapist and the occupational therapist?
Well, I mean, I was bound by stigma. Um, uh, and but when you hit an acute mental health crisis like I
Mhm.
did, I
Mhm.
mean, I mean, you have one choice.
Yeah.
I mean, the choice is either, you're gonna end things or
Mhm.
somebody's gonna admit you to the hospital. And so at that point, stigma becomes less of an issue
Mhm.
because there's no other choice. but I certainly didn't tell my peers at my job why I was suddenly taking a medical leave. I
Mhm.
certainly didn't tell my boss. I didn't tell my HR business partner. Most of my friends didn't know. So I was bound by stigma. Uh,
Mhm.
and I didn't reach out to some local resources that could have made a big difference to me because I was worried about confidentiality and people sharing.
Mhm.
So I think stigma did play a very big role. And certainly when I interviewed that for that job and when I accepted that job, they had no idea.
Mhm.
They had no idea that I was sick.
Mhm.
So I, had to, when you're taking 19 pills a day, 6 times a day, um, you in a shared office space, you need to find places to take those pills.
Mhm.
And so I had to find places to take those pills. I had to plan it around my meetings. So stigma played a big role, a big role.
Mhm.
It was exhausting.
Mhm. And you're a big advocate for reducing stigma. What do you think it takes to start reducing stigma at an organizational level?
So I think I'll talk more at a societal level because I think it's a little more
Mhm.
challenging at an organizational level. So on a societal level, it's simple. People just need to speak out.
Mhm.
So, when I decided I was going to start speaking out, it was last year. I was fulfilling on a vow that I had made when I was hospitalized that if I ever recovered, I would run the Boston Marathon to raise money for better access to mental health services. And it wasn't kind of out of the blue. I had been a marathoner before. And in fact, just before I got sick, I had finally run a Boston qualifying time and was literally the day before had done my first training run for the Boston Marathon
Wow.
for that year. And so, I knew that platform, it was the biggest kind of platform that I knew. And so in September of 2024, I finally felt like it was time that I was gonna, there was no way I could at this point run a Boston qualifying time anymore, but that, I could probably get onto a charity team.
Mhm.
And I have to admit, finding a Boston Marathon charity team, there's almost 200 different charities in Boston. Finding one in the area of mental health services is almost as difficult as finding a good psychiatrist in town. It was very hard, but I did, and I got onto their team, and we had our first team meeting, and there were 25 of us running, eight for this particular mental health center, and I shared my story of why I was there, why I was doing it. And afterward, people came up to me, really thanked me for sharing. And just as the training season went on, I started opening up more and more. And I'll be honest, not all of my family members wanted me to do that. They felt that I might be really endangering my professional
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
But I just felt really to be my true authentic self. How can you not tell people about
Mhm.
the most important thing that's ever happened to you, and still kind of have an interaction. And so, literally the day before the Boston Marathon, I wrote a little piece, probably just about 1,400 words, that ended up getting published in just a local newspaper in my town. And I sent it to my sister and she posted it on LinkedIn. And
Wow.
the next thing I knew, I was flooded. First of
Wow.
all, it really helped my fundraising.
Uh-huh.
I became the highest fundraiser
Wow.
ever for the
Wow.
Brooklyn Center of Community Mental Health. But second of all, it was out there. So all of a sudden I started hearing from people. Um, People I knew, people that I didn't know. And then
Uh-huh.
I decided after the marathon, which went horribly, by the way, particularly for somebody who had been a qualifier,
Um,
it took me 7 hours and 22
you
minutes to
finished
run.
the I'm sure people are like, she finished the marathon. People always ask me, like, how long is a marathon? And you ran for 7 hours? Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
I know. Well, I did, and I walked a lot
You
of
what?
it.
Well, that's humongous to me, a
It
mission
was, it
accomplished.
was, it
Yeah.
was really unpleasant. I'm not gonna lie, but the best thing was they closed the course, at 4 p.m.
Okay.
And my husband and daughter met me at mile 23, and I said, "Where are your shoes?" And they ran the last 3 miles with me, which
Wow.
you would never be able to do because it's a very secured course. And that
Uh-huh.
was very meaningful. And at the very end, my husband ran ahead of the finish line and took this awesome picture of me like crossing the finish line. Nobody else in sight, right? Because everybody else was done, but they had
Yeah,
still the finish line up, and then I got my medal and I was really,
that's so
really
great.
proud.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I posted a big story, this time myself, kind of telling my story. And really, I mean, I heard from so many people that I realized, it's really important to share the story. And since then, that was almost a year ago exactly. I've been speaking out as much as I can. I've given fundraising speeches. I've given speeches in various different organizations, just making sure that people know what happened to me, so that they feel less alone and bringing attention to the issue. And then I serve as a local community resource. Um, People come to me all the time because they know what I've been through, and they ask how they can be connected to the system, and I give advice. So I would say that's how I'm going about it at an organizational level. I think it's a lot more challenging.
So something that you said in there, I really want to hone in on because even coming on this channel, people are really afraid to be vulnerable. And sometimes we'll film and I'll hold it and they don't want to share because, vulnerability coming at a time that's also aligned with where they are in their own recovery so that if there is feedback, it doesn't set them back a tremendous amount.
Mhm.
And for me personally, where I started my own healing journey was I shared my story on Kevin MD. Before that, I almost died from starvation from, I was just in isolation. I had quit surgery. I thought I was an ultimate failure. I was so afraid to speak up because my own internal dialogue and shame. And then I learned shame is really healed in connection with others who are non-judgmental and compassionate. And what
Mhm.
your story just captured for me was you were told, the people, especially older generations, are so afraid of the mental health stigma because it was even more stigmatized, I think, previously. And you said, you know what, I need to share this. And then you were met with that a lot of, it sounds like, very positive feedback. For you personally, how did sharing your story and getting that support on LinkedIn, how did it change what you felt inside in your own relationship with yourself?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. I would say I was even told by my McLean care team not to share my story
Mm,
because they were so concerned of the stigma that it would impact my employability.
mm,
Um, so I made sure the last job that I had that they knew what had happened and that I was becoming a mental health advocate and I would be speaking out in the biggest platform I could. And they were fine with that. And that was
wow.
very important and meaningful. And in fact, um, when some of the younger people in my company actually saw some of my LinkedIn posts, someone pulled me aside and he said, Caroline, a lot of us are talking uh, about what you're doing. And thank you. Thank you. And so yeah, I just can't imagine not sharing.
Hmm.
When I was sick, I was so worried. I had 30 years of professional credentials. I'd done so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just lost everything. I won't be able to work again. I won't be able to, do my craft, do my sharing. But what I realize now is I have so much more to offer.
Hmm.
So by sharing my story, that I can help so many more people than I ever could.
Hmm.
I was a good researcher. I am a good researcher, but a lot of people are good research. A lot of people can do what I was doing. But not that many people went through what I did and are willing to talk about it. So I feel like that's like one unique thing that I can offer the world,
Wow.
and I need to offer it.
Hmm. The amount of energy, and it just went through my body, just even the conviction and knowing how important this is to get out to reach people. When you are feeling like this is a mission that I am embodying that I can't say no to, what does that feel like inside of you?
It's very energizing.
Hmm.
To me, this is such a big issue. It's the most important thing,
Hmm.
besides, my family and of course my professional career. This is critical. I mean, the mental health crisis right now is shocking. It is simply shocking how many people are out there that need care. how many insurers will not cover it. They play games. I was given lists of providers that my insurance would cover. I mean, you call those phone numbers, they lead to dead ends. I mean,
Uh,
anyone that's ever gotten those lists knows that. I mean, there was just a piece in the New York Times about it a few weeks ago, but it's like, okay, yeah, we all know this. Um, if you call a hospital to try to make an appointment, they're going to tell you 8 months out
mhm,
because the hospitals don't want to give the clinic space to mental health services because the reimbursement is so low.
mhm,
They want to save those rooms for, the proceduralists. And so the resources don't exist in the traditional systems where they should. And it's like this little underground to try to find it. So I feel like it's just such an issue that I need to be telling people, I need to be teaching people what I learned and how they can access resources because they are there. They are
mhm,
there. They're just not in front of you. And in terms of the stigma and the shame, I mean, people call me and they say, you're the only person I felt like I could talk to. Well, that just highlights how significant the stigma is.
mhm,
And then, with the treatments, I was absolutely shocked. As someone, I'm a diabetes specialist, and it's so protocolized. I mean, A, B, C, D, we have guidelines. This is the order you do the medicines in. You know, this is what you reach for. It's a number-based game. Psychiatry couldn't be any less like that. I mean, there is nothing. It's like us throw the spaghetti on the wall type of approach to figure out what medications work, and so many of them don't. I mean, I think we all know the statistics.
mhm,
Most patients who are treated are not adequately treated. And, I'm a drug developer, and when that happens, when you have drugs that don't work very well, it's because we really don't understand the underlying biology.
mhm,
And so we really need to understand the underlying biology so much more of psychiatry
mhm,
so that we can design drugs that work a lot better than the ones that we currently have. So when I see the crisis from kind of all those three angles, I just feel so passionate and so energized
mhm,
by the work that needs to be done. And I know me as when I'm not going to change the system, right? It's just not possible. But if I could even help one person
mhm,
and prevent one person from going through what I went through, because my situation could have been prevented.
mm,
If I had been able to get proper access to an appropriately trained psychiatrist right away,
mhm,
uh, I think I probably wouldn't have spiraled like I
mhm,
did.
mhm.
So, yeah.
There's so much in there too about thinking how many obstacles are in the way of getting access to care. And when you're already feeling low or feeling like you don't know what's going on, you don't know what could help you at the time. I just picture even thinking about being a healthcare professional, the systemic impact and how we can develop that learned helplessness and just kind of deflate. And you're not doing that. You're still energized to step up. If people are saying, hey, I need to be an advocate, this systemic issue seems huge, and I don't want to have a learned helplessness. I want to be advocate. What helps you to say, I'm still energized, I'm still going to be an advocate despite the breadth of this problem?
You know what helps me was when somebody calls me and I give them direct advice and it helps them.
Mhm.
And it happens weekly. It just happened last week. Um, Somebody that I peripherally knew heard one of my speeches. She had a friend that was in an acute mental health crisis. She remembered my speech and she thought it sounded like me. She found me, she called me. I gave her advice and her friend followed it and got the care that she needed. That's what drives me. But, you know, for all the people that laugh and say, oh, you're not going to change the system, Caroline. Oh, $36,000, that's not enough to help. Or, when I try to pitch a story to various news media and they just turn it down. Oh, we've heard that before. I just think back to the people I have helped.
Mhm.
And that's what keeps me going because I know if someone had been able to help me like that, it would have changed everything.
Wow, that's really seeing that every single life matters. There's like a little story, a tale that's motivational where there's a young boy walking with, I guess, grandpa. I won't get the details exactly on point, I don't think, but it goes along the lesson. You may already know this. They're walking along the beach with all of these starfish on the beach,
Yeah.
and the kid's throwing one at a time. And the grandpa says, "You're not going to be able to save them all." And he throws in another one. And he says, "I saved that one."
That's exactly the story I think back to all the time. The starfish story.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. That it really is, helping one person at a time. But with mental illness, it affects it affects not only that person, but the whole family. I mean, any illness does, but mental illness can really tear a family apart. And I saw what it did to my own family the year that I was sick. I mean, it was devastating.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think when you help one person in a family with mental illness, you're helping their entire family. You're
Hmm.
helping their entire network. And so it is a one by one approach, but it has further reach.
Absolutely. For people that don't know, and you and I haven't had an opportunity to get to know each other really well, I'm actually completing my master's in marriage and family therapy, which is we're all systemic focused, meaning that
Yeah.
we know symptoms, signs and symptoms can be signs and symptoms of a family issue, dysfunction, and the individual, like you were saying, biological components, mental health, or other stresses, whether it's like trauma or chronic illness. And I'm interested in psycho-oncology. So cancer, I had an acute illness that turned chronic where I almost died a few times. That impacts the family, and the family impacts your recovery. So if you have a family that can be there to support you and they believe Caroline can get well, that might impact you a little bit different than outcasting, further shaming, stigmatizing. I don't believe you're going to get better. Like for me personally, like I had internalized a belief that I was a burden on my family
Yep.
and that they would be better off without me, and that further went into the spiral of suicidality and everything. So just really appreciating it. And then again, your voice on this to say, okay, well, that's a shame, a shame spiral. How does shame heal? It heals in relationship to others. Isolation is what exacerbates it. So I really value the systemic approach. And even if we apply that to the organizations where you're working and you're saying, okay, if we speak up, we can change society. Well, society is that big system in which we all exist. If we change stigma, well, then more people will speak up. If we're not afraid to lose our career, I lost my military career for speaking up, so I know it happens.
Mhm.
Now I'm more able to speak up because I have already lost my military
Right,
career.
right, right. Yeah,
So yeah, so it's like, thinking about you are the change. We are going to change the tides and start moving it in another direction. And it takes the individual to change the system and the system to keep um, really cultivating and embracing that change process.
absolutely. And I really want to commend you on doing, this master's in family therapy because, it is so important. And when I was at the residential, I did have access to family therapy and we did do it. And I'll admit it was very painful, but it was very helpful.
Hmm.
Um, I had that same shame spiral that you described. I was a burden to my family.
Hmm.
I'm lucky that I had family support, but I felt like a huge burden. I had nothing to contribute. Previously I had been a physician. I managed a large group. I mean, I was caring for patients, and being a physician had always been my primary identity. It's the first thing I lost. I mean, I had to shut my clinic down. Um, and that contributed to my feelings of hopelessness and that the world would be a better place without me, and suicidality. Absolutely. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, thinking about it on an organizational level, I do partner with an organization called One Mind.
Hmm.
They're based out of San Francisco. And one component of what they do is helping companies and organizations make the workplace more amenable to people living with mental illness. And, to me, that's really, really important because, to get those accommodations, can be challenging. And to have a company that realizes the value of everybody and is willing to take on accommodations for people with mental illness is very important. Oftentimes we think of accommodations in a very certain way. I know as a manager I filled out plenty of reports for people with carpal tunnel syndrome to get them a moving desk, or back pain to get them a better chair. But here we're talking about accommodations for mental illness, and they literally have a scorecard for different companies that want to participate, so that they can get a ranking of how they're doing and the way that they interact with their employees who may be living with serious mental illness. So things like that are really, really important. You've probably not heard of the organization. You're probably not aware of the work they're doing. They partner with very high profile companies, but there is a lot out there. We just need more. We just
Mm-hmm.
need more.
Yeah, and it goes with the recovery model of thinking about anyone with mental illness, and when it went back to you volunteering and having a sense of meaning and seeing what you can do, like then our brain focusing on what we can do and not so much on what's wrong with us, I think is so helpful. And to be able to have meaning. There's a book called Never Enough: When High Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic, something of that nature. It talks about the importance for children to be doing chores in their family and not so much focus on these achievement-based outcomes in school in order to have a self-worth. That's a more important, more protective for their mental health to focus on their contributions to the family so you have a sense of meaning and purpose. So your example there of the accommodations is helping people to work, to be able to provide meaning, accommodate for the things that they might need to do differently in order to be successful. I can only imagine how helpful that is to saying, hey, I'm capable with small adjustments that I can contribute in such a meaningful way, and what that does for a person. For me, a lost sense of meaning was really catastrophic. I didn't even want to eat. Like, why would I eat? There's no point. There's no purpose. There's no. So I
Mhm.
just really, in you sharing that, I thought it was so valuable what you're doing, what that organization and you are doing to create that culture to allow people to continue to work and adjust so that they can thrive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pretend that, we've made huge strides. I mean, obviously, I'm at a different place in my career. I felt more comfortable speaking out. I'm established.
Hmm.
I'm better. For
Hmm.
many reasons, what happened to me shouldn't happen again. My father had something similar when he was in his 20s. And, I am a geneticist, so I believe in the power of genetics. His
Uh-huh.
never recurred. He's in his 80s now. So I think I probably had an odd variant of what he had. And so, I take comfort in that. And I think a lot of these things do make it easier for me to speak out, than other people.
Hmm.
And I want to leverage that because
Yeah.
I do sit in a certain important place kind of in my career and my life trajectory that does give me that ability, when I think if younger me would have not said a thing, I would
Hmm.
have been too worried.
Yeah.
And frankly, I wouldn't I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah.
I
That
wouldn't
makes a lot of
disagree with that.
sense.
I mean, you mentioned you lost your military
Yeah,
career. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, I did. I had same access to care issues as a military member. I was willing to sacrifice my life for our country, but because I had TRICARE insurance, it's a very low reimbursement rate. I couldn't get acute access to care to one of the inpatient eating disorder units that my team thought would be a really great fit for me because it was run by internists. They thought that would cater to my brain, who loved the medical aspect of it.
hmm
I ended up going to a residential treatment center, couldn't keep me because I was too medically compromised. They
yep,
transferred me to a medical hospital who was like, you need industry help. So I was stuck between two people that were like,
right,
not
right,
it. So that stay where I didn't even actually get treatment is what led to my military career being lost. But a year after, because I didn't even want to try again, because I did not feel safer being under
right.
the care of someone else because people don't know anything about anorexia. Like, okay, that's a very polarized comment, but a lot of people misunderstand anorexia. A lot of the treatment centers that I am aware of don't really have specialized treatment or a holistic perspective of what is anorexia. It's still shaped in that very superficial, like body focus, weight focus, which will be a whole different conversation. But as aligns to what you were saying, like I went into my own home institution and that had with it its own because people that I had worked with, then I was flipping chairs, then they saw me in a different role, and it was such a social experiment. I
Oh
was
yeah.
treated so differently by some people, and it was very disillusioning for me. It was one of the reasons why I went into marriage and family therapy and want the more humanized approach, systemic approach. But I just really see how that parallels a lot with your advocacy, and I can appreciate what you are doing. It's like to the depth of my core.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely understand everything you're saying. I mean, first of all, not being able to get the care that you need because, there are medical issues and there's psychiatric issues, and there's very few places that can take care of both.
Mhm.
And so that was certainly an issue that I faced. And as you just articulated that very well, you faced that exact issue. The second thing is, you literally can't get sick in Boston without being treated by your friends.
Yeah.
And I I was.
Mhm.
And at first I was mortified to think these people are going through my chart because I know what my chart looked like. And if I had walked into my clinic, I know what I would have thought, like, reams of psychiatric notes, right? Oh my gosh, who is this person? Um, but that's just what it is. And I think the place that I felt probably the worst um, was when I actually had to get an MRI under full anesthesia. And I went, basically in pre-op, and all the doctors are coming in, and I didn't have my name badge on. And I never thought about how important that ID badge meant to me. It said doctor, that I was just a patient. I was on the other side, just like you mentioned.
Mhm.
And it was a terrible feeling. And I could see what all the doctors thought of me. I would have thought the same. I mean, their first thought was like, oh my gosh, I don't want this to happen to me.
Mhm.
And then pure pity, and then hatred. Who wants to be around the crazy psych patient? We're not pleasant to be around. I don't blame doctors, but what can you do? And then the last aspect, and you talked about this a lot with people not understanding anorexia,
Mhm.
focusing on body image. I think there's a huge issue in psychiatry that's still so pervasive of this being an underlying behavioral disorder. And it's not.
Mhm.
It's, neurochemical transmitters that are suddenly imbalanced in your brain. It's a metabolic disease, just like diabetes is. But for some reason, because we don't understand it, everybody just jumps to that behavioral aspect, which by definition blames the patient.
Mhm.
So it's just because we don't understand enough about psychiatry that that's where we land. But the unfortunate thing is, as a patient, I felt blame. I spent a year running through reels in my head, like, what did I do? Every single thing that had led up to my acute illness. Like, what did I do? Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that. I put my whole family at risk, and like the guilt. I mean,
Mhm.
it's terrible.
Mhm.
So I can definitely relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, I love marriage and family therapy approaches that we all like are most externalize the problem from the person in many different ways. And really, again, it's all multifactorial, like all the different components that are contributing. I love the biopsychosocial and spiritual approach to all.
Hmm.
Like that is my main. I'm not going to look at it in one way. I'm gonna let's get this whole picture. You said identity a few times, and I want to go towards that because in the crisis unit, so I almost did psychiatry, so I did my acting internships in psychiatry. I was on psychiatry units a lot doing my rotations, and in the crisis unit, there was a lot of people that came in feeling suicidal because they lost their job. A lot of men face that, and then the identity here in the job and then also as a mother, so a working mother, and we're approaching Mother's Day, and so thinking about how all of this impacted your perception of, you said about losing your job, who am I if I am no longer working as a physician?
Hmm.
How did you identify when it came to your, being a parent and impact on your role in the family?
Yeah, such a good question. So, around identity, I mean, I lost everything. I lost my identity as a physician, as a pharmaceutical executive, as a mother, as a wife, as a partner, as a friend, as a contributing member to society. But the thing that hurt the most,
Mhm.
because I was so wrapped up in it, was my identity with my job. And what was shocking was how few people actually reached out to me from my job. Um, there were just two people that reached out and that knew what was going on. And I felt like I really had friends. Well, guess what? Your job's your job.
Mhm.
Your job's not going to be there for you. It's your family that cares about you. It's your friends, it's your support network. And that was really a really important lesson for me. And, through recovery, I changed my identity. That my identity is no longer hinged to my job and my career. It's hinged to so much more, like who I am as a person, like what I want to contribute to society. Um, so I think that was a really important piece. You mentioned Mother's Day. So, Mother's Day is a Sunday. I mean, losing my identity as a mother was really hard.
Mhm.
I remember one time my daughter, she was 15 at the time, had just walked down. There's a pond near our house, and she had walked down to the pond, and she came back and she said, I just went to the pond and I saw 11 ducklings swimming and they had no mother.
Mhm.
And she just stared at me. And I knew exactly what she was saying, and she knew exactly what she was saying. And I felt terrible. But
Mhm.
I couldn't take care of anyone.
Mhm.
And I couldn't be a mother. And it was really, really hard. And, Mother's Day that year, this was 2022, so it's only 4 years ago, um, was a terrible day. My husband gave me a card, very well intentioned, and it said, I, looking forward to better years in the future.
Mhm.
And then they gave me a mug with Wonder Woman on it. And everybody used to joke, they used to call me Wonder Woman because I was able to accomplish a lot. But when I was sick, I couldn't accomplish anything. And it really hurt to kind of get that mug. I mean, no one intended it that way, but that's where my brain was. And then they had to go pick up one of my other kids at college, so everybody just left, and I spent the day, I think, with my parents. I couldn't stay alone. I
Mhm.
mean, it's too much of a risk. And 2 weeks later, I was cleaning out the fridge, um, and I found a little round cake with yellow icing that said Happy Mother's Day that they had forgotten to give me. So I just threw it out along with the
Mhm.
mug. But it's a reminder that, this Mother's Day and all the ones since I've been well, it's a celebration, but it's also of a reminder
Mhm.
of one, my own illness and how I wasn't able to be there for my family, but also how many other families will be celebrating Mother's Day
Mhm.
without their mother there through whatever reason or illness. But, suicide is one of the top causes of death in women in our age group, when you often have kids at home at a time when they need their parents as much as possible. So it's always bittersweet at this
Mhm.
time of year when I think
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, with all that comes up, how do you plan to support yourself on Sunday?
Celebrate, I still have my own mother, so I celebrate my
Mhm.
mother. We do celebrate Mother's Day, but I also, I'm thinking about, the mothers that aren't there, and I will post about it, on my own LinkedIn feed where I do a lot of my mental health advocacy, just as a reminder.
Mhm. So we'll be on the lookout for that. I'll make sure to.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for that. And so much of what you said today, I really appreciate. And I want to ask, is there any message that I haven't asked you about that you want to make sure that we share with the audience?
You've asked so many great questions. So I think the most important thing, if anyone who's listening, and is experiencing their own mental health crisis, to know that you're not alone, that there are other people out there, and, you know, as much as you can connect with them and understand how they found their way out, is really, really critical. And that the resources are there. They can be really hard to access, but they are there. And it just takes linking up with somebody like me who's been through it, and that there's hope that you will get better. You will. As my therapist told me, people just aren't doomed, and they're not.
Mhm.
And there's a way out. So that those would be my main messages.
Well, I appreciate those. And I appreciate you being a light. And you said connecting with people like you. So if they're hearing this and like, how do I connect with Caroline? How would they best do that?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, again, I'm just one person. I hesitate to give out my email.
Yeah.
Um,
We
yeah,
won't give out the email. We
yeah,
practice boundaries for self-care here.
exactly, exactly,
So
exactly. But
LinkedIn.
we'll find a way. We'll find a way. But there's me in every community, and I think that's the most important thing.
Mhm.
So find me in your community.
That's
Uh,
beautifully said. And then to follow you on LinkedIn to see your beautiful posts, I think is a good way to, and I have it framed in my own brain. And then that was such a great example of how we all do need to identify how much we're able to give without losing ourselves in it. And you sharing your voice the way that you are on this platform will reach so many people, I hope. And like you said earlier, if it just reaches one person and they feel that they're not alone and they can get connected, and it reached me. I was here on the opposite side of you today, so you've already succeeded in that. I really appreciate it, and I hope more people can definitely find you and hear this wonderful message that you shared with us today.
Well, absolutely. And I want to thank you so much for reaching out. I think we connected on Facebook through the
Yep.
Women Writers Group. So there's just so many ways to connect, and important connections come from the most unexpected places. And, mental health resources are exactly the same way. I mean, I found my residential. My father was literally on a phone call with his high school graduating class,
Wow.
of how many people were still alive. And, he was talking about his daughter with this illness. And one of the members of his high school graduating class happened to be a psychiatrist retired in Topeka, Kansas.
Wow.
I mean, of all places, Topeka, Kansas is where the Menninger Clinic started. It has now moved to Houston.
Hmm.
That's how we found out about it. I
That's
mean, so
incredible.
it's all of these kind of connections. So I'm grateful that we were brought together and
Likewise.
to learn about the important work that you're doing,
Yep.
and to be, a guest on your podcast. So the work you're doing is very, very important. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel the same about you. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And for those who are listening, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to share them down below. And until next time, thanks for being here.
Right. Thank you.